Hello, my name is Michael Uyttebroek, and I'd like to welcome you. I'd like to do a presentation on the overall consciousness block. So I have some explanations, clarifications. Right. Over the years, I've had several questions concerning the overall consciousness block and the consciousness block. I thought that everything regarding the basics of these terms had been clarified. For example, that the spirit form reincarnates along with the incarnating consciousness block, and that the overall consciousness block remained in the fine material realm. However, I ran into a statement in Billy's book about the fluidal energy, respectively fluidal powers and other things. And here is a sentence, page 74-75 of the German-only version. And it states, translated into English, according to the creational law principle regarding the birth of a life form, it is given that a personality, respectively an individuum, is not capable of reincarnation, but rather that this is limited to the spirit form and to the overall consciousness block. So this puzzled me because I didn't realize or didn't know that the overall consciousness block also reincarnates. As a result, I wrote a letter to Christian Frehner of the FIGU Switzerland group, stating, I have come across a statement in the fluidal energy book, which makes me again think about the overall consciousness block and its ability to reincarnate, even though it may still remain in its own fine material realm. This is a bit confusing because in Diversikum, the book written by Guido Mustruger, on page 301, it is stated, quote, in the planetary realm of the other world is also found the overall consciousness block, which always remains in the other world, and which creates the individual consciousness blocks. So, what is the correct answer? I haven't looked in Wiedergeburt yet, but I suspect that this is the same as what Guido wrote, if my memory serves me correctly. Because in that book, it specifically talks about the reincarnation of the spirit form and the incarnation of the consciousness block. And upon death, the consciousness block enters into the overall consciousness block. This question was then discussed with Billy, and Christian then subsequently wrote an article on this topic. Here is the main section of it, and the complete article can be found in one of our newsletters on the FIGU-Landesgruppe Canada website. It's one of the later newsletters. Sorry, I don't have that number available right at this moment. I'll put it in the description box. So, here we go. Quote, this is what Christian wrote. Concretely, it is about the statement that one overall consciousness block, on the one hand, is given to the human being, which after his/her death remains so long in the realm of the other world, respectively in the corresponding creation realm of the death plane, in order to reincarnate on the 21st day after conception into the newly born human being as an intact overall consciousness block, to whom, however, also exists an overall consciousness block in the creation energy realm as a creational counterpart, which naturally at all times remains there, but which can be used informatively by the overall consciousness block of the human being for the evolution. After clarification of the facts, the following situation presents itself. The term overall consciousness block is used for the purely creation energetic block of the human being, which is constantly present in him, her, as part of the creation energy, as an all-knowing factor of everything which is learned in all lives. Consequently, it forms the human overall consciousness block, which, together with the spirit form, respectively creation energy form, enters into the embryo on the 21st day after conception and begins to be active. This OCB, we'll call it that for short, overall consciousness block, creates the initially empty consciousness block, CB, which is successively filled by the human being during his, her life with what he, she has learned, which corresponds to what he, she has evolutively learned, and after which, after the death, empties itself, so to speak, into the human OCB, dissolves again, and neutralizes again in the death realm, respectively, the realm of the other world. And then the OCB creates a new consciousness, which in turn must evolve itself in the life of the human being. The creation energetic OCB is, on the one hand, thus given to the human being, whereas on the other hand, however, also a OCB of the creation itself is given, in which everything is stored that exists somewhere in the creation realm, so to speak, that crawls, flies, walks, lies, sleeps, jumps, comes into being, and is or becomes otherwise active in some form as a consciousness-based manner, in a consciousness-based manner. However, since both OCBs are connected with each other in an impulse-based manner, the human being during his, her life can also draw information from the creational OCB and use it for his, her consciousness-based evolution. The so-called storage banks are at the same time also involved and contribute their part to the entire process of the Ahnung, which is an inspiration of the subconsciousness. So contribute their part to the entire process of the Ahnung, hyphen memory, hyphen inspiration, hyphen becoming aware, learning complex, therefore, to human individual consciousness-based evolution. Explained is that according to the still inadequate evolution state of the earthly human being, it is not permitted to elucidate or to teach him, her, all consciousness-related aspects and terms down to their finest ramifications. On the one hand, because he, she does not or cannot understand them, and on the other hand, because too many details of the connections of the whole are confusing the human being, leading him, her, onto false thought paths, and as a rule, brings him, her, no direct consciousness-based benefit with regard to evolution anyway, to the evolution anyway. So this little diagram here tries to depict that concept, that there's a creational overall consciousness block, and there's also the human overall consciousness block and the creation energy part piece or spirit form, and these reincarnate into the fetus, and the consciousness block, which is created by the overall consciousness block, incarnates into the fetus. Okay. The 7 foundations of being human. So, Christian goes on to write, instead of concerning oneself in depth with concepts of the primeval origin of the overall consciousness block and the consciousness block, the human being would do better to learn to think rightly and to live according to the creational natural laws and recommendations. This requires that the values of the character are rightly formed according to the ethics, and the behaviors are whipped into shape in this high form, which are then to be brought to bear accordingly in life. What is taught with the teaching, the terms that are used, etc., such as those in the book Ursprung aller Existenz, which is an extract from which is in the book Diversikum, is meant for the human beings far into the future, because truthfully, the present day human being of Earth can practically do nothing concrete with it yet. It is not making oneself important with concepts such as absolute nothing space or nihilo space or infinite duration, etc., that distinguishes the human being as such, but rather what he/she does ethically right and what he/she learns from his/her life, namely to be a good human being who cares for himself or herself, for the fellow human beings, for all ecosystems, and consequently also for the far-reaching whole of nature with its flora and fauna, for the atmosphere and for the climate. It is therefore not senseful, indeed practically impossible, to explain all terms down to the last detail, but rather it is important that the human being rightly does what he/she makes and does, how he/she puts into practice and brings to fruition his/her ethical values, and how he/she lives out his/her behaviors. The human being who reads what is explained in the books, studies the teaching, and follows these, should not get stuck on the individual terms. On the contrary, they should recognize the sense, make the necessary ethics from it for the kind and wise of behavior, and accordingly develop their lives, therefore evolve in a consciousness-based manner. In the school, the human being learns to calculate, write, and read, but what is done with it and out of it results individually according to effort and interest. Ethics, for example, are not learned through the school or rudimentally at most, but rather must be worked out personally and individually. Ethics do not develop by themselves, purely through the reading of books or through a few stories told, etc., but rather through analysis of cause and effect in everyday life, through constant observations of the inner and outer processes, thoughts, feelings, emotions, seeing, living experience and hearing, and the drawing of the right conclusions. All right. What is further to say about the term overall consciousness block with the limited thinking of Earth humans? This term is at most to be understood in analogies, but cannot be consciously, logically followable. This block reaches into the creation realm, which for the human beings of Earth, with their present consciousness-based evolution state, will not be ascertainable for a long time yet, if ever. This applies especially also for the specified scheme of the interactions between the different consciousness forms in the book Diversikum on page 301. And just for your interest, here is that scheme or image. From Wiedergeburt, Leben, Sterben, Tod und Trauer by Billy on page 8 to 9, quote, just as the creation itself is absolutely neutral towards all its creations, so therefore also is the spiritual consciousness of the human being absolutely neutral, and is only the receiver and processor of the evolutive impulses that come to it. from which it creates and stores within itself knowledge, love, and wisdom. In contrast to this is the material consciousness, the ego of the human being, its personality, respectively consciousness form, which autonomously makes perceptions, researches things and facts, consciously learns and works out results from everything, which then, if they correspond to the truth and reality and true evolutive values, pass in an impulse-based manner from the material consciousness via the thoughts and feelings as well as via the sensor and psyche into the material subconsciousness and into the material central consciousness, from where they then, in an impulse-based manner, cross over into the spiritual central consciousness in order to reach via the spiritual subconsciousness as well as via the sensor and the gemüt as spiritual fine sensitive feelings and impulses into the spiritual consciousness. So there you go. That's something that is interesting, but to really know that information is a whole other it's still going to be several lifetimes, I would say. Now, to continue, it may be interesting to mentally occupy oneself with this schematic. However, if one then tries to transfer this concretely to the processes in one's own brain, then the human being is at a complete loss as to what to do. Instead of pondering about the spiritual, respectively, creation energy-based conditioned consciousness in order to thereby gain supposedly important cognitions, supposedly, because the high, fine, fluidal realm exceeds the limited material capability of thinking of the human being for the time being, it is, as said, recommendable to concern oneself in the day-to-day life with the possible consciousness-based evolution or threatening stagnation. Conclusion. Not only with regard to the term overall consciousness block, but also with regard to many further terms in the mental realm, the human being is currently only scratching the surface and has no idea which aspects and significances, etc., will remain hidden from him/her still for a long time. It is for this reason sensible that he/she practice modesty and, as a current kindergartner, not try to shine with citations of knowledge taught at university level. A stable consciousness-based evolution occurs step by step, and not by means of falsely hoped-for shortcuts and things that always remain illusory, and which in the end are not grasped in their real connections and remain useless for the personal, ethical, and general good, and rightly being human in a real and true sense evolution. And with that, I thank you very much, and I hope you got something from this presentation, and till the next time, Salome.